The tragic story of Willie Kimani, Kenyan lawyer who was killed for helping his client against a rogue cop. When Rebecca Wanja received a "Please call me" SMS from an unknown number at 4 p.m. on June 23, 2016, she ignored it. The number later called her twice, but like most Kenyans who think that every new number is a scammer, she didn't pick them either, not knowing that the man calling was helping her husband, who was trapped together with his lawyer and driver inside a container at Syokimau police post. They had been illegally detained by rogue cop Frederick Leleman, whose plan was sinister, having not booked them on the OB. So her quick response was the only thread of hope they hang on, as Willie the lawyer threw a scribbled tissue paper to the man with this message: "Tafadhali pigia, Rebecca Mwambi ambia Rose, Willie na mwenda wameshikwa na wako Syokimau kwa chief, wako hatarini." Sadly, her response was not as fast as they thought, and by the time the boda rider who was riding through when he heard their distress call bought credit and texted her, it was already too late. The cop killed them STH, which haunts her to date. How they got here? Well, Rebecca Wanja was the trusted wife of boda operative Josephat Mwendwa, who worked in the small town of Syokimau. Having dropped out of Rompo Secondary School in Form 2, due to lack of school fees since he was an orphan, Jose moved from his rural home of Marimanti in Tharaka Nithi to Syokimau in search of greener pastures, which were slowly provided by his uncle, who not only supported him by funding him in a short course, but also granted him a motorcycle. Josephat, being a young hardworking chap, grabbed the opportunity with both hands and hustled his way in the fast-growing town. Like most boda operatives, he hanged along busy streets waiting for customers. And it was during one of his daily routines that he met a beautiful Rebecca Wanja, who, after falling for his vibes, was deeply impressed by his hard work, leading her to a come-we-stay marriage. The two were officially man plus boo, with a babe at home. Josephat doubled his efforts at work, aiming at raising a family which he himself never enjoyed while growing up. However, as Josephat rose up every day to earn an honest living, another man was waking up to terrorize Kenyans unfairly, with the most shocking part being that he had been bestowed upon the responsibility of protecting them. His name was Frederick Leleman, and he was the officer in charge at Syokimau Police. So on April 10, 2015, as Josephat was going about his business, he was approached by a plainclothed Fred, who quickly started harassing him over frivolous claims. Jose, being an honest man, denied the projected claims, and Gafla bin Vu, an argument began. Suddenly, Frederick Leleman pulled out his gun and shot a defenseless Jose in his arm, leaving him bloodied. Out of panic after seeing the results of his senseless actions, Frederick quickly rushed Jose to the hospital for treatment, but later arrested him after sizing up the situation that was on pace to turn against him, having been committed during the day in the presence of many witnesses. With cop privilege, he filed fake criminal charges against Jose, who was still writhing in pain from the gunshot wound. A big betrayal to Jose, who was now wondering why he had a case to answer at Mavoko Law Court in Criminal Case 2020 of 2015, charged with 3 counts of being in possession of narcotic drugs, gambling in a public place, and resisting arrest by a police officer. These fraudulent charges forced Jose to seek the help of IPOA, who, after he filed his complaint with them, immediately sprung to action, knowing the sensitivity of these cases. They interrogated Frederick Leleman, who was not so happy with this turn of events. So on Dex 13, 2015, with the IPOA KE strong on his neck, he decided to use his cop privilege again and abducted Josephat from his house at 3 a.m. His intention was to intimidate Joseph enough to withdraw charges at IPOA BC. They were after his dismissal. So while on transit to Mulolongo police station, like a scene from Serafina, Frederick threatened to finish what he had started but failed to. This was to kill Jose BC. He was a small man. Gladly, Jose was resilient like a soldier and didn't comply. So Frederick again trumped up new charges against him to try and arm twist him more. This time he booked him under the Traffic Act with 6 counts of riding a motorcycle without a license, insurance, a helmet, reflector jacket, and carrying excess and uninsured passengers. Funny thing was that Jose was still recuperating from the gunshot wound, so there was no way he could ride a motorcycle. With that in mind, he knew this case was a home run for him, so he took the charges and went to court, hoping IPOA would come to help sooner. Sadly, again as it is with Kenyan justice, it delayed, and Jose religiously attended his court cases, with 16th Feb 2016 being the day he lost his faith in IPOA after he was arrested again and taken to Mlolongo police station under robbery charges. Gladly, no charges were filed. But this incessant harassment only left him with one option, but to seek assistance from a higher authority, which he found in International Justice Mission, IJM. While here, he explained his tragic events, and without hesitance was linked to their top lawyer, Mr. Willie Kimani. Willie Kimani was a hardened human rights lawyer and activist who had represented former Mungiki spokesman Njuguna Gitau, who was killed in broad daylight by cops. He had been admitted as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya in 2011, and after an unpaid internship at Release Political Prisoners Trust, his passion for human rights grew, so Jose's case was fodder to him. Josephat was now under his wing, and he promised to help him get justice, which was quickly evading him, oblivious to the fact that the cop who he was going after, Mr. Fred Leleman, was also seeking help from a police informer, Mr. Peter Ngugi, whom he would use to trail Josephat when their case was heard on June 23, 2016. Experience like no other, Willie Kimani built his case for a landslide victory, gathering all necessary evidence. His previous works had prepared him well for this kind of work, which he understood was risky. But since service to man is service to God, he dedicated his all despite his wife sharing her fears about his line of work. To him, fear was nothing but an illusion. So on the fateful day of June 23, 2016, he woke up early, dressed smartly, and left his beautiful wife and kid for Mavoko Law Courts, ready to kick some cop ass in court. Unbeknownst to him, the kiss he gave his wife would be the last. Because as he slept the previous night, rogue cop Frederick had already met with his police informant at the police canteen and shared his plan to kill Josephat the next day. So as Willie woke up at 5 a.m., his killers were also awake with a plan in motion. After leaving home via a boda, Willie was picked by his trusted taxi driver Patrick Maruri, who took him to Mavoko Law Courts with their client, Josephat Mwendwa. By 9 a.m., they had arrived early, ready to get justice. They were conveniently earlier than Peter Ngugi, who was in the company of a female tasked with identifying Jose, whom the informant would track. So on arrival with Cash 2K already in his pocket from Fred, he started the work after being shown Jose. Court proceedings began, but he chose to wait outside to keep an eye on Jose, who was adequately represented by Willie in his full aura. At around 11 a.m., court was adjourned, and Jose plus Willie left the room, throwing Peter into action. On noticing their movement, Peter immediately informed Fred, who instructed his fellow cop Leonard Mwangi to stop their car, which was now leaving Mavoko Law Courts. Sensing no fear because they were with a lawyer, they complied and were bundled into Fred's car. Peter Ngugi entered their hired taxi and drove it, following them to Shokimau police post where, after they were dumped in the container, he was instructed to dump the car at Maru. However, the problem was that the taxi was well known in Zimmerman, so driving around that route would be risky. So he decided to drive to Limuru town, where he dumped the car plus their phones, which had been left in the car at Kwambira Forest around 3 p.m. Meanwhile, Willie, Jose, plus their driver were holed up in the container at Syokimau police post. With the police in charge, Sylvia Wanjiku, failing to record their names on the occurrence book, confirmed that the purpose of this arrest was sinister. It was scary AF, and the lack of knowledge of this arrest threw the trio into panic mode. Willie Kimani, being a fast thinker, decided to scribble the call for help message on a tissue paper and waited for a passing boda rider, whom he gave by throwing it outside a broken pipeline. He wanted the man to help him by calling Jose's wife. But sadly, Jose's wife Rebecca was not picking up the call. It was an unknown number, so when she finally did, it was already late since the trio were already handcuffed in a boot en route to their deathbeds along Nairobi-Imsa Road. On arrival, the trio were subjected to a 3-hour harrowing experience where Fred and another cop, whom he roped into his plan, Mr. Shebere Steve, argued on the method of killing them. Imagine sitting there while people discuss how to kill you. Traumatizing. After back and forth, their fate was decided, and Patrick escorted them one by one to their killers Fred Leleman and Stephen Shebere, who strangled them after stuffing them with a polythene bag. Right there and then, the three died and were packed into sacks, ready for disposal. The cops later carried their lifeless bodies with this car and dumped them at Oldonyo Sabak River, where Shebere had worked as an officer some time back. so he showed them the location. Thinking that everything was past behind them, the rogue cops went back to Mlolongo and ate supper. They thought they had escaped this, but since they touched a lawyer, they weren't going to go easy. Lawyers demonstrated all over Kenya with I Am Willie, leading to their arrest and convictions years later for at least 20 years each in jail. The mastermind Fred was given the death penalty. Justice was served in the very end.